let's go back in time before the internet. Not quite that long ago, but fast forward to the 1950s.
You ain't nothing but a hound dog, you're crying all the time.
In the 1950s, television was black and white, cars guzzled gas, and Elvis was king. Computers in the 1950s were large machines taking up entire rooms, so expensive that you and I would never purchase one, but universities, large corporations, and government institutions might, and isolated. These machines could not communicate with each other. They did not have any way of sending or receiving data from another computer. Standalone machines, kind of the opposite of the internet with its connectivity. 1957, historic event. Sputnik was launched by the Soviet Union. It was the first ever space satellite and considered a threat to the United States. And in response to Sputnik, the United States formed a group called ARPA, Advanced Research Projects Agency. ARPA is still around today. They added a D for the word defense at the beginning of it, and so today it is called DARPA. But one of the things that ARPA came up with was a military communication project that turned into the internet we use today. So scientists started figuring out how to send binary data, ones and zeros, that all computers use, from one machine to another using phone line technology, which involved essentially connecting wires together to give one long wire from point A to point B. The same type of direct connection used for voice was able to be used to send computer data. And these types of direct connections, unfortunately, were unreliable. Something could happen anywhere along the way, and the connection would be disrupted. So ARPA developed the concept of packet switching, where one by one individual pieces of the data, the message was broken into small pieces, and they were individually sent and recompiled on the other end. Packets are small chunks of data, and when you surf the web, send a text message, stream a video, you are sometimes sending hundreds or thousands or millions of packets depending on your activity, and this is how the internet works today. The great thing about packets is that if there's a problem along the way, the packets can automatically divert and redirect to an intact route. So if this was a military communication from East Coast to West Coast, what ARPA conceived was that if some of the telephone lines were to be damaged for some reason, that the packets would simply automatically go a different way. Reliable, redundant, indirect connections. And so this is the technology that ARPA developed for a more reliable system of communication called packet switching. The internet today uses packets. And you could say the internet was born in 1969, but they didn't call it the internet back then. It was called the ARPANET because it was ARPA's network. And this was a government project still, but they did team up with universities. In 1971, 2 years after the first packets flew in California between UCLA and Stanford, we have a few other universities and a few other nodes that are on the ARPANET. By the 80s, some satellite connections. Today, well, billions of connections. A little more about the history. In the 90s, the internet became popular when unlimited plans came out, and AOL was a company called America Online was a huge internet provider with unlimited plans. Once people started having the ability to sign on for a fixed price as opposed to having to pay by the minute in the early 90s, once people started to have a monthly fee to use it as much as they want, they started using it quite a bit. And every company out there said, hey, let's get a website. Prior to the mid-90s, most companies did not bother with websites. There weren't enough people using the internet. It wasn't until the 2000s where most people at home got the kind of internet speeds that allowed you to stream video. And so the 90s was a internet experience essentially without videos, or the videos that were there were short, low resolution. In the 2000s, we got what we consider the modern internet. When the jolly old postman goes to deliver the mail, how does he or she know which house to deliver each envelope? And how do packets get delivered to the right device? The address. And in the case of packets, it's called an IP address. So here's what goes on behind the scenes. When you connect to the internet, your device is assigned an IP address to use for that session. Now, it could be that you only have that IP address for a day. It could be, in the case of your home connection, that your Wi-Fi router uses the same IP address for months on end. But these IP addresses are a temporary loan, of which a record of that loan exists from your internet provider. Now, when you send and receive packets over the internet, your IP address is identified on every packet you send. The thousands of packets that you send, every one of them has the IP address of where the packet is going and where the packet came from. And that is so that the machine that you're communicating with can send you back data. Otherwise, it would be a one-way transmission. And the internet is certainly transmission that works in two directions. One of the things to consider is, are people or entities able to look at those packets? And the answer generally is yes, depending on your circumstance. If you're using internet within the school Wi-Fi, the school can monitor the packets and see what's being sent and by whom. If you're talking about something like the U.S. government looking at packets, they do. If there's suspicion of a crime, an IP address can be matched to a user's identity by finding out from the internet provider who that is. If we go out to the internet and look at the Verizon transparency, spelled that wrong, but whoops, I think that's close enough. If we go out to the internet and look at the Verizon transparency report, here we go. Verizon comes out and tells you, and Comcast has one of these as well, so do a few of the other companies. They'll tell you exactly how many times per year there is a subpoena or a court order or a warrant or an emergency request. That would be something like a bomb threat where they need to find out very quickly whose IP address it is. So for Verizon, first half of 2016, for example, 135,000 requests from law enforcement to match an IP address to a user's identity. It's an interesting. You're not necessarily being watched all the time, but you are leaving trails of packets all the time. And when somebody comes looking to see has a crime been committed, they're generally able to find out a match of whose IP address was assigned to which individual or which device at what time. Now, what about bad guys trying to snoop on your packets? And, well, if you're running on your home network with something called encryption, or if your cell phone is connecting to a network with encryption, encryption is a general term that means you are locking down your data so that nobody can see it or understand it, that it wasn't intended for. Now, you can encrypt packets, you can encrypt files, you can encrypt an entire device. But in the case of Wi-Fi, if you're wondering, is your connection encrypted? If you're running a password, that does mean that encryption is enabled. The password is not the same thing as the encryption. It's more of like a lock and a key. They're two different devices, but they are related. Now, if you're ever connected to Wi-Fi without a password, for example, at a restaurant or hotel, your data is not encrypted. And what that means for you is as you surf the internet at a hotel or restaurant, anybody within range, anybody in the parking lot or anybody sitting in the back of the restaurant could easily, with the right app on their laptop, see what you're sending and receiving. So public Wi-Fi is something that you should use carefully, not logging into your accounts or purchasing things and sending out your name, address, and credit card number. But you could use public Wi-Fi to read the news, to go on YouTube, things that you wouldn't mind if somebody were able to easily intercept. So this is a brief introduction of how the internet works, and of course you can feel free, anything you're curious about, to look into further. Thank you.